If there's one thing that I have learned about my menial viewership numbers, it's that people like it when I talk about Harry Potter. That makes sense. I love Harry Potter too. I've indulged my own preferences for a little while so I can give you guys what you want again. Also, it's been long enough since the last time I was negative for me to not feel ranty, because when I make a video on a Harry Potter movie, it's going to be negative. I don't really like any of them. This won't be as bad as my next Rodgers and Hammerstein video, but it won't be happy. In my Azkaban video, I said that the first two movies were kind of a slog to get through. And at least one person took issue with this, and so I feel the need to explain why I said it. Just a quick note before I dive in, the action scenes are also filmed inside of a boring way. I need to say that because I can sense it, but I lack the knowledge of how to execute a great action scene in order to communicate why they fail. That's something that would be better left to somebody else, so I'm not going to touch it. What I want to focus on is things that can be blamed specifically on the movie's execution by looking at things that were changed inside of the adaptation. Not things that were left out or added, just changed. Things that were altered from the book in a way that is objectively less interesting. What kind of things am I talking about? Well, let's start off by looking at the very beginning of the movie. No, I'm not going to complain about cutting Uncle Vernon's morning. I'm only interested in changes for this video. Dumbledore walks out of the shadows and onto Privet Drive. That seems fine. But this is that moment in the book. A man appeared on the corner the cat had been watching, appeared so suddenly and silently, you'd have thought he just popped out of the ground. So, you know what's mysterious and interesting? A man suddenly appearing on a street corner. You know what isn't? A man walking down the street. Sure, he's dressed funny, but that's not jarring. This is exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about. That is not a change that had to happen for the adaptation into film. In fact, it was tailor-made for a film moment. It's not even that difficult to do. You shoot the street corner, and then you have Dumbledore walk into the shot, and then you shoot again, and then you splice those things together, and suddenly he just appears. They could do that in the 50s. But for some reason, they decided to go with a duller version. Moving on about 10 minutes, we come to the letters, just the whole sequence. The movie version starts with Harry getting a letter. Dudley takes it, the Dursleys look at it, and then they all get really concerned. They even make the weird choice of having Dudley be upset about it, which implies that he knows about Hogwarts. Now, the book, on the other hand. Dad, said Dudley suddenly. Dad, Harry's got something! Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter, which was written in the same heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. That's mine, said Harry, trying to snatch it back. Who'd be writing to you? Sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green faster than a set of traffic lights, and it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was the grayish white of old porridge. Petunia! He gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach. Aunt Petunia took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment, it looked as though she might faint. She clutched her throat and made a choking noise. Vernon! Oh my goodness, Vernon! They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his stick. I want to read that letter, he said loudly. I want to read it, said Harry furiously, as it's mine. Get out, both of you, croaked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letter back inside its envelope. Harry didn't move. I want my letter, he shouted. Let me see it, demanded Dudley. Out! Roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scruffs of their necks and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, his glasses dangling from one ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen at the crack between the door and the floor. That's the first scene. Next movie scene. 3 letters are dropped through the slot, and Uncle Vernon rips them up. Fine. That's the parallel book scene. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hall toward the front door. Arr! Harry leapt into the air. He trod on something big and squashy on the doormat, something alive. Lights clicked on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realized that the big squashy something had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure that Harry didn't do exactly what he'd been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for about half an hour, and then told him to go and make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen. By the time he got back, the mail had arrived right into Uncle Vernon's lap. Harry could see 3 letters addressed in green ink. "I want," he began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into pieces before his eyes. Next scene, Uncle Vernon blocks the mail slot, but when he kisses Petunia goodbye to go to work, there are 5 letters just sitting on the porch. The parallel book scene, Uncle Vernon didn't go to work that day. He stayed at home and nailed up the mail slot. "See," he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails, "if they can't deliver 'em, they'll just give up." "I'm not sure that'll work, Vernon." "Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They're not like you and me," said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock in a nail with a piece of the fruitcake Aunt Petunia had just brought him. On Friday, no less than 12 letters arrived for Harry. As they couldn't get through the mail slot, they had been pushed under the door, slotted through the sides, and a few even forced through the small window in the downstairs bathroom. Yeah, the entire video is going to be like this. Next scene, Uncle Vernon burns the letters, and the book sentence is pretty much verbatim since it just says Uncle Vernon burned the letters. So the next scene is the iconic letter flood scene. Letters come flying through the fireplace, the mail slot windows everywhere. Thousands of them. Harry grabs one and Uncle Vernon chases him down to keep him from reading it. Okay, book scene. "No post on Sundays," he reminded them cheerfully as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. "No darn letters today." Something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply in the back of the head. Next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt in the air trying to catch one. "Out! Out!" Uncle Vernon seized Harry round the waist and threw him into the hall. Aunt Petunia and Dudley had to run out with their arms over their faces. Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off the walls and the floor. Okay, this is going to seem an odd complaint in the context of what I've been doing, but while the movie version is more exciting, I think it was a bad idea. The house is carpeted in letters. The air is full of them. Thousands of letters. They are practically swimming in them. This might be the most dangerous stunt Radcliffe ever had to do because of the danger of paper cuts. Amidst all of that, you're going to tell me that Harry couldn't get one letter? How is that possible? Also, the shot of him on the table amidst just this tornado of letters, and it taking him so long to catch one, really does a lot to dispel the idea that he's a natural seeker, doesn't it? So yeah, all but one change was less interesting, and I don't think that it was a good idea. If I had been making the movie, I would have kept burning the letters and gone with. While Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls to the post office and the dairy trying to find someone to complain to, Aunt Petunia shredded the letters in her food processor. All right, now on to Hagrid's introduction. I hate this scene. It is so boring to watch, which is really frustrating because it's one of those chapters that you reread apart from rereading the whole book because it's so enjoyable. And it's from the very get-go. Hagrid disarms Vernon by bending the gun like Bugs Bunny. That is funny, and I love Looney Tunes. But this is that moment in the book. "Oh, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into a corner of the room. Similar, but also less interesting. Also, I have to point out that the misspelling of Happy Birthday is not in the book. I don't know why they decided to make Hagrid dumb. Now this is... Okay, this is how Hagrid reacts to Harry not knowing what Hogwarts is or that his parents were a witch and wizard.
"Of course you'll know all about Hogwarts."
Sorry, no.
No? Blimey, Harry, didn't you ever wonder where your mum and dad learned it all?
Learnt what?
You're a wizard, Harry.
Now, the book. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No, said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them who should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Did you never wonder where your parents learned it all?" "Oh, what?" asked Harry. "Oh, what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just 1 second!" He had leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school, after all, and his marks weren't bad. "I know some things," he said. "I can, do math and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world, I mean. Your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursley!" he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mibblewibble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mum and dad," he said. "I mean, they're famous. You're famous." "What? My mum and dad weren't famous, were they?" "You don't know. You don't know." Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know what you are," he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop!" he demanded. "Stop right there, sir! I forbid you to tell the boy anything!" A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. "You never told him. You never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and you kept it from him all these years." "Kept what from me?" said Harry eagerly. "Stop! I forbid you!" yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. "Go boil your heads, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard." There was silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. Now, I can understand cutting things for time, but Hagrid's reactions are downright dull compared to the book. Vernon and Hagrid are yelling at each other, but inside of the movie, it is a calm conversation where the Dursleys look more annoyed than anything, and they are not even remotely scared of Hagrid. And this isn't even the last of it. We're still going with this scene. And I'm going to do the book first this time. "If he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him," growled Hagrid. "Stop Lily and James Potter's son going to Hogwarts? You're mad. His name's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there, he won't know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his own sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts ever had, Albus..." "I am not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks!" yelled Uncle Vernon, but he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head. "Never!" he thundered. "Insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me!" He brought the umbrella swishing down through the air to point at Dudley. There was a flash of violet light, a sound like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and the next second, Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back on them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through a hole in his trousers. Uncle Vernon roared. Pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room, he cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind them. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. "Shouldn't have lost me temper," he said ruefully, "but it didn't work anyway. Meant to turn him into a pig, but I suppose he was so much like a pig anyway, there wasn't much left to do." That is one heck of an ending to a scene. It hits on so many levels. The Dursleys have been horrible bullies to Harry his entire life, and Uncle Vernon in particularly bullies everyone and always gets his way. Harry is awed by this giant who shows up and not only is immune to Uncle Vernon's tactics, but is actually intimidating to Uncle Vernon. Vernon keeps trying to push his will against Hagrid, and Hagrid is not having it. But finally, Vernon makes one last attempt to take charge of the situation, and it does not work. In fact, it ends with Harry watching the bane of his existence flee into the next room to hide from the only person who has ever seemed to care about him. It is deeply cathartic and one heck of a whammy. But this scene is a double whammy, and the second whammy is that up till now there has been no evidence that anything that Hagrid is saying is true. But then suddenly he makes a pig's tail pop out of Dudley's butt. So after that hype, here's that scene in the movie.
He's going to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world, and he will be under the finest headmaster that Hogwarts has ever seen, Albus Dumbledore.
I will not pay. I have to stop it right here for copyright reasons and to make a comment. This is an exhibit of a constant issue with Columbus's directing inside of these movies. This sounds nitpicky, but in the book you notice that Vernon interrupts Hagrid. He cuts him off mid-word. In the movie, Hagrid not only finishes his sentence, but there's a brief pause for Uncle Vernon to take a breath before he responds. Dominic Noble, before he took down his Harry Potter videos for stupid reasons, said inside of his Chamber of Secrets review that it feels like Chris Columbus has never seen an argument. People talk over each other, interrupt, don't listen, and raise their freaking voices. I know that he's capable of this because of the genius of the opening scene in Home Alone. Frankly, though, this makes you wonder how much of it was Columbus and how much of it was Hughes. Moving on, Vernon responds.
I will not pay to have some crackpot old fool teach him magic tricks.
I didn't just read it like I did because I wanted to. Look at this. This is how it's written. All caps. Yelling. Richard Griffiths did not give a caps lock delivery. Now Hagrid retaliates.
insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me.
This is how this is written. All caps, pauses throughout, like Hagrid is having to breathe between each word. And this decision to make Hagrid calm and collected really messes up what happens next.
Of me.
See, in the book, Hagrid is enraged and spur of the moment puts a spell on Dudley and immediately regrets it. In the movie, he calmly responds, aims his wand at the Dursleys, thinks about it, decides to curse an 11-year-old child, and then does it. This changes Hagrid's character. Book Hagrid lost his temper and did something bad out of anger, and he regretted it. Movie Hagrid decided to do something bad and was only concerned about getting in trouble over it.
Oh, we'd appreciate it if you didn't tell anyone at Hogwarts about that.
One's a good person with a flaw. The other one is a bad person who needs a sit-down with Uncle Ben. So not only is that whole scene far duller than it should have been, but it also kills both of the aforementioned whammies. In the book, Uncle Vernon is the most Uncle Vernon he has ever been when he insults Dumbledore. In Harry's mind, there is no beating that. But Hagrid not only cows Uncle Vernon like he has a couple of times already, but he does something that sends the Dursleys fleeing into the next room and slamming the door behind them. The movie Dursley's doing this and sort of shuffling out of frame doesn't have quite the same visual punch as watching them barricade themselves in another room. So that is one whammy gone. The second whammy is gone because they made the decision to do this. In the book, there's a mystery to how Hagrid starts the fire. His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled chip bags in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. So, cursing Dudley is the first time that Harry sees definitively that magic is real. Not so in the movie. Now, there's some arguments to be made about how this played out. I read a few larger sections, and they probably had to be cut for time. I understand that. But my point isn't what's missing, it's what's changed. There's no emotion in this scene at all, and it doesn't feel like the power struggle that it's supposed to be. Another possible explanation is that Robbie Coltrane seemed like a very sweet and affable person. Rest in peace. So maybe there are takes where he did yell, but he just couldn't quite pull them off. Well, my dismissal of that would be a director should be able to figure out how to get that kind of performance from an actor. Also, he had a long career before this, so I have my doubts that could have possibly been the case. Jeez, I could have done this entire video on this one scene. All right, moving on to the leaky cauldron.
Bless my soul.
Good gosh, Tom had a rough 2 years. Meth. Not even once. Okay, so people find out that he's Harry Potter. The room gets quiet like he's a gunslinger. The closest man to him stands up, shakes his hand, and then sits down. Then another woman shakes his hand. Now we're on to a conversation with Quirrell. This all seems fine. What am I complaining about? Well, good lord, said the bartender, peering at Harry. Can this be? The leaky cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. Bless my soul, whispered the bartender. Harry Potter. What an honor. He hurried out from behind the bar, rushed toward Harry, and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. Welcome back, Mr. Potter, welcome back. Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realizing it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scraping of chairs, and the next moment, Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the leaky cauldron. Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter. Can't believe I'm meeting you at last. So proud, Mr. Potter. I'm just so proud. Always wanted to shake your hand. I'm all aflutter. Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you. Diggle's the name. Diddless Diggle. I've seen you before, said Harry as Diddless Diggle's top hat fell off in his excitement. You bowed to me once in a shop. He remembers, cried Diddless Diggle, looking around everyone. Did you hear that? He remembers me. Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crockford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward very nervously, one of his eyes twitching. So that's bit different / boring. You could argue doing it the book's way would take more time, but honestly, the faster and more chaotic you filmed it, the better it would be. And my gosh, it's not like the way that they did it was quick. You could have at least had more than 2 people and maybe have them be excited. Also, they should have introduced Diggle because he shows up later. This one is so tiny, but it's making me more annoyed the more I think about it. Cutting forward a good bit to the troll. This is a minor quibble, but in the movie, the boys see the troll wander into the girls' bathroom, and they go in to help Hermione. And then in the book, this happens. The troll stopped next to a doorway and peered inside. It waggled its long ears, making up its tiny mind, then slouched slowly into the room. "The key's in the lock," Harry muttered. "We could lock it in." "Good idea," said Ron nervously. They edged toward the open door, mouths dry, praying the troll wasn't about to come out of it. With one great leap, Harry managed to grab the key, slam the door, and lock it. Yes! Flushed with their victory, they started to run back up the passage. But as they reached the corner, they heard something that made their hearts stop. A high, petrified scream, and it was coming from the chamber they'd just chained up. "Oh no," said Ron, pale as the Bloody Baron. "It's the girls' bathroom," Harry gasped. "Hermione," they said together. I just find the fact that they accidentally locked the troll in with Hermione to be way more interesting. The fight itself is boring, and I do know enough to know that the blocking is one of the main reasons for that boredom. Ron enters the bathroom, throws a stick at the troll, and then stands in the same spot for the entire scene. Not only does he do that, but he's in half the shots, so you see him just standing still the entire scene. And you can tell it's not because he's too scared to move, it's because Rupert Grint wasn't told to do anything else. Moving on again. I just noticed this part during my reread. Ron and Hermione join Neville, Seamus, and Dean, the West Ham fan, up in the top row. As a surprise for Harry, they had painted a large banner on one of the sheets Scabbers had ruined. But what did Wormtail do to that sheet? On to the Quidditch match. I can't analyze the action and tell you why it's boring, but I can tell you about a change that they made that made it less interesting than it would have been. Lee Jordan's commentary. Good gosh. In my list of things that HBO needs to include inside of the Harry Potter series that they have planned, I forgot to mention Lee's commentary, and I apologize for that because its absence is inexcusable. It is so fun and so funny and would have added nothing to the runtime. These are all of Lee's comments in the movie.
Hello and welcome to Hogwarts' first Quidditch game of the season. Today's game, Slytherin versus Gryffindor.
The players take their positions as Madam Hooch steps out onto the field to begin the game.
The bludgers are up, followed by the golden snitch. Remember, the snitch is worth 150 points. The seeker who catches the snitch ends the game. The quaffle is released, and the game begins!
Angelina Johnson scores! 10 points for Gryffindor!
Slytherin takes possession of the quaffle. Bletchley passes to Captain Marcus Flint.
Another 10 points to Gryffindor.
He's got the snitch! Harry Potter receives 150 points for catching the snitch.
Now the book. And the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive too. Jordan! Sorry, Professor. The Weasley twins' friend Lee Jordan was doing commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. And she's really belting along up there. A neat pass to Alicia Spinett, a good find of Oliver Woods last year, only reserved. Back to Johnson, and no, the Slytherins have taken the quaffle. Slytherin Captain Marcus Flint gains the quaffle, and off he goes. Flint flying like an eagle up there. He's going to no! Stopped by an excellent move by Gryffindor keeper Wood, and the Gryffindors take the quaffle. That's chaser Katie Bell of Gryffindor there. Nice dive around Flint. Off up the field, and ouch! That must have hurt. Hit in the back of the head by a bludger. Quaffle taken by the Slytherins. That's Adrian Pusey speeding off toward the goalpost, but he's blocked by a second bludger. Sent his way by Fred or George Weasley, can't tell which. Nice play by the Gryffindor beater anyway, and Johnson back in possession of the quaffle. A clear field ahead, and off she goes. She's really flying. Dodges a speeding bludger. The goalposts are ahead. Come on now, Angelina. Keeper Bletchley dives. Misses. Gryffindor score! Slytherin in possession, Lee Jordan was saying. Chaser Pusey ducks two blodgers, two Weasleys, and Chaser Bell and speeds toward the... Wait a moment, was that the snitch? So, after that obvious and disgusting bit of cheating, Jordan? Growled Professor McGonagall. I mean, after that open and revolting foul. Jordan, I'm warning you. All right. Flint nearly kills the Gryffindor seeker, which could happen to anyone, I'm sure. So, penalty to Gryffindor taken by Spinett, who puts it away with no trouble, and we continue to play. Gryffindor still in possession. Slytherin in possession. Flint with the quaffle. Passes Spinett. Passes Bell. Hit hard in the face by a bludger. Hope it broke his nose. Only joking, Professor. Slytherin score. Oh, no. Yes, I'm very aware that film is a visual medium, so none of that was necessary to include, but it's fun. And I don't know if you've watched a sport in the last ever, but that kind of commentary is exactly what happens while it's going. Minus the bias, and frankly, I miss when sports commentators were biased. It's way more entertaining. Moving on to the Mirror of Erised. The movie shows us this. Harry standing there with his parents, gazing on him lovingly. And that is perfectly fine. I like it, in fact. But, doing my due diligence, the book does describe it this way. Harry was so close to the mirror now that his nose was nearly touching that of his reflection. "Mom," he whispered, Dad? They just looked at him, smiling, and slowly Harry looked into the faces of the other people in the mirror and saw other pairs of green eyes like his, other noses like his, even a little old man who looked as though he had Harry's knobbly knees. Harry was looking at his family for the first time in his life. The Potter smiled and waved at Harry as he stared hungrily back at them, his hands pressed flat against the glass as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. He had a powerful kind of ache inside of him, half joy, half terrible sadness. So this one is debatable. The intimacy of Jess's parents is really good, but I also like the idea of the whole room being filled with people that look like Harry. To the argument of the whole video, yes, 2 people is less interesting, but it kind of works in a different way. Really just have to pick your preference. So skipping way forward again to the Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest. This is how we first see him in the movie. Malfoy and Harry walk into the clearing, and there he is, drinking the unicorn's blood. In the book, this is what happens. Harry had taken one step toward it when a slithering sound made him freeze where he stood. A bush on the edge of the clearing quivered. Then, out of the shadows, a hooded figure came crawling across the ground like some stalking beast. Harry, Malfoy, and Fang stood transfixed. The cloaked figure reached the unicorn, lowered its head over the wound in the animal's side, and began to drink its blood. This one is a minor quibble. I just think that watching him enter the clearing is way scarier than him just being there. Immediately after that, we have Harry's conversation with Firenze. Firenze. I'm not sure, honestly. It's fine, and the actor playing Firenze is great. But you know what's just a little bit more interesting? Riding on the back of a freaking centaur! I just think that one's a no-brainer. And salting the wound, why was that cut, but this line stayed in?
Harry Potter, this is where I leave you.
How about, you're safe now, and I must go? I don't think that Harry's feet have moved since Firenze entered the scene, and no one says, this is where I leave you, when they haven't taken them anywhere. Unless they're being really meta. Or according to the script, this is where I leave you. Bye. Going on to the Devil's Snare obstacle. The kids jump onto the plant, Devil's Snare, and it wraps them up. Hermione says that it's basically like quicksand, and they need to stay still or it's going to kill them faster. She does, and then it pulls her down onto the path. The boys are rightfully concerned about her because they can't see her, but she tells them that she's okay and they need to relax. Harry does, and he's sucked down too. Ron doesn't listen and panics and flails, so they have to kill the plant. In the book, it plays out like this. Lucky this plant thing's here, really, said Ron. Lucky? Shrieked Hermione. Look at you both! She leapt up and struggled toward a damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the 2 boys fought to pull the plant off them. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. Stop moving! Hermione ordered them. I know what this is! It's Devil's Snare! Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help, snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. Shut up! I'm trying to remember how to kill it, said Hermione. Well, hurry up! I can't breathe! Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Devil's Snare, Devil's Snare. What did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and the damp. So light a fire! Harry choked. Yes, of course. But there's no wood! Hermione cried, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Oh, right, said Hermione, and she whipped out her wand, waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flame she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the 2 boys felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies, and they were able to pull free. Lucky you pay attention to herbology, Hermione, said Harry as he joined her by the wall, wiping the sweat off his face. Yeah, said Ron, and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood, honestly. Now, a lot of commentary has been generated about how dirty the movies did Ron. All of his best moments were given to Hermione. She got to keep all of hers, and then all of her flaws and foibles were either nixed completely or given to Ron. Super Hermione and stupid Ron are Steve Klove's worst and most consistent sins in this entire movie series. But I'm not talking about that. Instead, I'm worried about excitement. And do you know what's exciting? Hermione getting away from the plant and the boys frantically trying to fight it off while she tries to figure out how to help them. And you know what's boring? 2 characters getting to safety through inactivity and then watching from safety as a character does not join them because he's being stupid, and then they briefly try to figure out what to do. Why was this done this way? It's just so boring. Okay, almost done. Final fight with Voldemort. I'm going to complain about the change of what Harry's touch does to Quirrell because it makes the fight boring. Also nonsensical. Quirrell tries to strangle Harry, so Harry takes the understandable action of grabbing his hand. Quirrell then lets go because his hand starts to dissolve. So Harry touches his face and his everything dissolves. Harry quietly holds the Philosopher's Stone, and then Voldemort's spirit, I guess, rises out of Quirrell's ashes and flies through him. Book time! Harry sprang toward the flame door, but Voldemort screamed, "Seize him!" And the next second, Harry felt Quirrell's hand close on his wrist. At once, a needle-sharp pain seared across Harry's scar. His head felt as though it was about to split in two. He yelled, struggling with all his might, and to his surprise, Quirrell let go of him. The pain in his head lessened. He looked around wildly to see where Quirrell had gone and saw him hunched in pain, looking at his fingers. They were blistering before his eyes. "Seize him! Seize him!" shrieked Voldemort, and Quirrell lunged, knocking Harry clean off his feet, landing on top of him, both hands around Harry's neck. Harry's scar was almost blinding him with pain, yet he could see Quirrell howling in agony. "Master, I cannot hold him! My hands! My hands!" And Quirrell, though pinning Harry to the ground with his knees, let go of his neck and stared, bewildered, at his own palms. Harry could see they looked burned, raw, red, and shiny. "And then kill him, you fool, and be done!" screeched Voldemort. Quirrell raised his hand to perform a deadly curse, but Harry, by instinct, reached out and grabbed Quirrell's face. "Ah!" Quirrell rolled off him, his face blistering too, and then Harry knew. Quirrell couldn't touch his bare skin, not without suffering terrible pain. His only chance was to keep hold of Quirrell, keep him in enough pain to stop him from doing a curse. Harry jumped to his feet, caught Quirrell by the arm, and hung on as tight as he could. Quirrell screamed and tried to throw Harry off. The pain in Harry's head was building. He couldn't see. He could only hear Quirrell's terrible shrieks and Voldemort's yells of, "Kill him! Kill him!" and other voices, maybe in Harry's own head, crying, "Harry! Harry!" He felt Quirrell's arm wrenched from his grasp, knew all was lost, and fell into blackness. Down, down, down. Okay, let's just start with the stupidity of the fact that Quirrell is clearly touching Harry's skin here, but is unaffected until Harry uses his hands. That's not the rule, and it's weird to make it the rule. The sequence starts with Harry trying to run, and Quirrell running to grab him. The movie starts with Harry standing still, and Quirrell flying to grab him. I forgot how early on they dropped the wizards can't fly without assistance rule. And no, the flying does not make it more exciting, because Harry trying to escape is much more interesting than Harry standing still. Also, Harry trying to run away is why Quirrell needs to grab him. In the movie, there's no reason for Voldemort to yell, "Seize him," because he can't go anywhere. And he's not trying to. Also in the book, Harry has one goal: hold on to Quirrell to keep him from escaping and killing him. Quirrell can't stand to touch him, so Harry's only hope is to hold on to him like a boxer hugging his opponent. Also, Quirrell is trying to escape Harry while screaming in pain. Harry's blacking out, and Voldemort is just screaming at Quirrell to kill Harry. This whole sequence may have been changed due to laws about children performing stunts, but holy crap, it would have been more interesting. That's all I've got about the boringness of this movie, so let's move on to some different complaints. You thought it was going to get away with just this? You fools! You underestimate how much I dislike these movies. I also mentioned in my Azkaban video that these stories are mysteries, but the movies utterly fail at that due to not giving clues. Example, we're trying to find Nicholas Flamel. The movie has Hagrid mention him, and then later Hermione just randomly remembers that she happened to read his name inside of a giant book. Now, Nicholas Flamel was a real person in history and in legend who was supposed to have invented the Philosopher's Stone. So his being mentioned is actually really clever, because if you know him and you know his story, then you kind of know what's going on. But children are unlikely to have that knowledge, so the book did this. Harry turned over his card and read, "Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts. Considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times, Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling." I love this because kids were sharing Harry's frustration, thinking, "I've read that name before too. Where was it?" Then when he remembers that it was on the chocolate frog card, we all smacked our foreheads right along with him. Then they left out that information, and with it died all hope of anyone who just doesn't know who Nicholas Flamel is figuring out who Nicholas Flamel is. But for some reason they kept the chocolate frogs. merchandising, I guess? You can't blame this one on time either. The rule is that 1 page of screenplay equals 1 minute of screen time, and I'm betting I could write out him reading the card and his realization, and it would not even take up a whole page. Another clue that's left out is somebody tricked Hagrid into giving up information on Fluffy. Harry figures it out and says,
Don't you think it's a bit odd that what Hagrid wants more than anything is a dragon, and a stranger turns up who just happens to have one?
but movie Hagrid never said that he wanted a dragon, much less that it's the one thing he wanted most in the world. So we have no reason to think that there's something suspicious about someone giving him a dragon egg. Also, it only recently occurred to me, but it was very nice of Voldemort to just give Hagrid the egg. He could have just said that he had one and kept it, but he gave Hagrid a real dragon egg. It was very nice of him. So that's the bad mystery stuff. Now let's go on to just complaints. Harry goes to shake Quirrell's hand, but he avoids it. Why? This is how he reacts to his hand dissolving.
What is this magic?
And that was after he grabbed Harry with no qualms because he didn't know that Harry's touch would kill him. This can be considered a bad addition because it's just not in the book.
It's not real, the ceiling. It's just bewitched to look like the night sky.
Okay, so the book's version of that line is, he heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts History." I consider that a bad change because the movie line is nonsense. The ceiling isn't real? Okay. I'm also sad that we never saw a stoat sandwich. I'm picturing like a tail sticking out between the bread. Last complaint, and it requires some explanation. One of the things that led to people really loving these books is the kind of realism of Hogwarts itself. Rowling's many side tangents and stories into things like homework and people not liking Harry, issues of popularity, sports, and studying all helps to make the whole thing more relatable and helps us to feel like we are in fact watching this kid's life as it plays out. It's not all about what's going on with Voldemort. There's a lot more going on in his life. And getting to see glimpses of the side characters' lives helps give us an idea of what life at Hogwarts would be like if all this crazy stuff wasn't going on. And it makes it a lot more jarring when everything starts to go to crap for everybody starting in Order of the Phoenix. So this brings me to the House Cup and the point system. In the books, it's a great idea to help kind of build a camaraderie between all of the different Gryffindors inside of the story. But as for how it helps the narrative, it helps to kind of embody all of these secondary issues inside of Harry's life and also give more weight to his many escapades. He breaks rules, he gets in trouble, and he loses points, and showing that what he does can negatively affect other people weighs on his conscience and gives a reason for him to be conflicted about doing the things that he does instead of just letting somebody else worry about it. In Philosopher's Stone in particular, after he really screws up and loses 50 points, everyone in school stops talking to him and he becomes a pariah. So all of that is the narrative purpose of the House Cup inside the books. But because the movie has to be tighter and can't focus on those side things, they really don't have any of the reasons to include them anymore. So, as controversial as it may sound, I think that they should have cut the house points and the House Cup from the movie. And I think that they realized this later because they didn't include them in any movie after the first one. So that would require some heavy rewrites inside of the end of your feast scene because the whole purpose of the scene would now be gone. But honestly, if you cut the whole house points thing completely, then I think that you could actually get away with cutting that entire scene and just going from Dumbledore talking to Harry to Harry going home. And you know what they could have done with all that extra time they'd have now? Extended Hagrid's entrance scene and had them read the dadgum chocolate frog card. Okay, I'm done now. Chamber of Secrets will be getting the same treatment very soon. I don't think it'll be quite as mean, but it'll definitely be the same train of thought. You'll see me next time if you subscribe. Bye.